All right, I was telling you something really funny about my kids. I'm not certain this is really funny, but Cheyenne is 18 and she now has a boyfriend. Okay. And so it's always interesting when she brings them home because we have 5 boys and 2 girls. The oldest one got married like she was the first one. So now we have Cheyenne, who's got 5 brothers, that when a boy comes in, I feel sorry for him. So Rob, her dad, is going to meet him the other night. So she sits down with her boyfriend. She says, I hate to say his name because I mean, you never know about boyfriends. They last a week. but she says, so she sat down with him. She said, look, when you meet my dad, you need to look him in the eye and then shake his hand really, really hard. Because the last guy that she dated, I guess he was introduced to all of her brothers, and it was like a wimpy handshake. Welcome, you're back. Yay. It was a wimpy handshake. And so anyway, so he had to like, shake his hand really, really hard, and that supposedly, you know, helps the dad to like him better. So we got in the car and we were walking towards him, and I just kept having to say, be nice, really nice, Rob. This poor guy, he's got, you know. So they did. So I told her the other day, we used to have this saying, nothing good ever happens after midnight. Yes. And now we've changed it, since there's a boy involved, nothing good happens after 10. So I told her that the other night, and she said, do you not trust me? And I said, oh, we trust you. We have 5 boys, but we don't trust them. So it has nothing to do with you. So, okay, the cutest thing happened this weekend, and it reminded me of you guys. Okay, so when we were at the theater, it was kind of a weird setting. No one could really talk. Now that we're here, you guys get in these conversations, and then we try to start. We have to like clap and weird stuff. But I went to our daughter's, Val, my son and daughter-in-law's, my granddaughter, I guess is what it is. She's 4 years old. She's so stinking cute, and she plays soccer. Okay, so can you imagine 4 and 5-year-olds running around the soccer field? Okay, they have no idea what to do, none whatsoever. So the game starts, and she goes out with her 2 friends, and it's like the whistle blows, and she stands with her 3 friends in the middle of the field like this. They're all having a conversation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like Bible study. I have no idea. My son is the coach, and he had to go out and say, girls, the game is going on. Like, let's get involved in the game here. So it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. So I actually thought about it. Okay, last week I said something, but I have to go back and tell you the truth of the matter. We were talking about John on the island of Patmos. And for some reason I said, John was on the island, right off the little island off the big island. So somehow I think you might think he was in Hawaii. He really wasn't. And I came home and I go, well, I think I alluded to the fact that John was in Hawaii. He really isn't. Patmos is in the Mediterranean between Greece and Turkey, so just an FYI on that. So I thought, sometimes my brain cannot catch up with my mouth sometimes. So. Okay, so we got the child care thing. If you have a friend that has 0 to 18 months, we're actually renting a room, hiring babysitters our own, so that I keep hearing from people saying, we want to come, but we have kids under 18 months. So if you know someone now, you can bring them. So, all right, yay. All right. If you're new here today, we're on part 5 of a series called People Like Us, and the premise is just that we are like disciples. They were people just like us with the same issues, problems, fears, disappointments, discouragements, all those things. And so we're trying to say that we are just like them, and they pretty much are just like us. So what we're trying to do here is learn what it means to be a disciple. What does it really mean to be a follower of Jesus? Because there's this word out there, Christian, that everyone says, well, I'm a Christian, doesn't mean anything nowadays. But we want to be our followers of Jesus, true disciples, and we want to know what that means. So what we've been doing is going through for the last a lot of weeks now, this is week 5, on all the different disciples and who they were, Peter, John, Andrew, and so today we're on the last one. And we're on Judas. And Judas is the one that it was a traitor, and so we want to talk about why would he leave Jesus? I just don't get that, because I think all of us know somebody who's walked away from their faith. Like, it's like they went to church, like, yay, I love Jesus, this is so cool, they get baptized, and they go on their way, and then something happens in their life that is so disappointing. Something, I don't know what it could be. They prayed for someone to get well, because they hear in church, like, just pray, and they'll get well, and that's what Jesus does for you. And the person dies, okay? Maybe they prayed that God would save their marriage, and then their husband walks in and says, I'm leaving you, and here's your divorce papers. And the marriage is just not saved. Or maybe they just prayed and prayed, I need a job, God, you know I need a job, please help me find a job. And then you're still looking. And so in the midst of all that, we talked about this last week, that many people think that being a follower of Christ is all about me. It's all about Jesus just making me happy. And what we learned last week is that we need to make much of him, not much of us. But when people first become a Christian, if somebody doesn't tell them the truth, then you know what, it's not about you, it's about him. And he does random things, and I can't even explain why he does. But you're going to have an option to walk away from your faith or to keep it intact. And all of us here are going to hit that same road at some point. So I want to talk about today what happens when people are disillusioned and disappointed with God. Because I think one of the reasons is they think that God should or shouldn't do something. God, I think you should make this happen, and then when it doesn't, we're just like, how can I even believe in him? How can I trust him? I ask for things, he doesn't do it. And so today we want to really, really hit hard on that, and that's going to be the majority of the lesson. But I want to talk first about those people who go to church for a while and get baptized, let's just say, and then poof, they're done. They walk away, just like Judas. And the question always is, are they a Christian? Now, I'm not going to judge, wouldn't have a clue, but I do want to talk about what the Bible has to say about that, because it really actually does talk about that. And so in your handout, the very first verse we have, 1 John 2:19, and this is what he says about these people. They went out from our number, but they did not really belong to us, because if they had been of us, they would have remained with us. But they withdrew, that it might be plain that they all are not of us. So I think the Bible makes it pretty clear that you see, and Jesus even mentions something in John 6, where all of a sudden people who were following him then became really hard, and they were like, how do I want to do this anymore? And even though they were all so excited about him, and now they walk away. And so what I think that this tells us is that there's something about perseverance to the end, that when a person, a true follower of Jesus, is a true follower, they're not going to walk away. And I don't believe they can, because they have God, the Spirit of God living within them, that's going to change them. And I think sometimes we have that one step forward, two steps back. So I'm not saying that people don't fall for a little while, but I think when you're a Christian, God really makes it clear that you will continue on to the end. And those that don't probably were never really of him anyway. And I was always raised with that whole once saved, always saved. And I do believe that once a person is truly, honestly saved, you're in God's care. But I think there's some, and we're going to find out with Judas, that out of the 12, and this is one that walked with Jesus for 3 years. How in the world do you walk away from something like that? I don't know. But people do it all the time. So I think we need to know. Now that's my problem with Judas. I cannot imagine seeing the things that he got to see, and then he's just like, I'm not believing in you. I was thinking about, he saw Jesus' compassion, and he healed the sick, and he forgave sin, and he cast out demons. Now, there's a lot of power going on behind all those things. And then he sees Jesus feeding 5,000 people, which actually is about 15,000, and with a little fish and a loaf, okay? And then he sees Jesus in the boat. Jesus calms this raging storm. And so he sees the power behind him. And then Lazarus, he's standing right there when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And you're like, who does that? Okay, I'm following this guy because he's so powerful, he has to be God. But somehow, Judas just never got that. I don't know, I can't imagine it, but it happens. And I think we got to understand that it happens. We have some friends of ours that we knew a long time ago, and they were very, very involved in church and teaching Bible studies, and they read their Bible, they loved God, and raised their children. And something happened that disappointed them, and it was over. And they're a mess, and I'm so sad because they had something so awesome, but they said, I don't want to do that anymore. It's not meeting my expectations. And so I think that for Judas, Jesus began to not meet his expectations. And I think we see that when they were traveling, when Jesus first started traveling with the 12, people would give them money. So they'd be like, hey, we're going to give you money so you can further your ministry and buy food for your people, whatever. Well, they hired Judas as their treasurer. So to me, they had to really, really trust Judas. Like, he had to be someone that was over and above trustworthy for them to handle all of their money. And I think sometimes when people fall, big people fall out of the church, and you're so shocked. And I think that when all of this happens, I think the disciples are really shocked. My parents have a steel company, and I remember one time a lady that used to work there, she just woke up in the middle of the night. She said something just doesn't feel right. So she went into the office, and she saw their accountant, and he was writing checks and hiding them. He was stealing from the company, like lots of money. He had a gambling problem. Okay, and yet it was so shocking to my parents because they're like, we trusted him. Okay, and I think that's how it is with the disciples. They just trusted this man, and they're going to find out that he was in this whole thing for something completely different than just following Jesus. So I think, first of all, the main thing that was Judas's problem, and I think most of the disciples at this point, was that they felt that when Jesus came on the scene, that he was going to take over the Roman government. Like he was going to be king, and everything was going to be great. Now the 12 disciples were going to be able to be like, yay, this is like the coolest thing, we get to be in the cabinet or whatever. And that they would rule with Jesus. And I don't know, did anyone watch that show the other night, The President's Gatekeepers? No, it's not. Oh my gosh. Okay, we were mesmerized. Did you see it?
Yes, very good.
It was so good. But it was all about, they took the chief of staffs from the presidents for the last 50 years and brought them all together and interviewed them like I was chief of staff for Clinton or whoever. It was so amazing how these guys are the buffer between the president. I didn't realize, like they're chief of staff for about a year and a half, because that's all they can take. It's a tough job. Like they'll talk to them before they talk to the president. So it's their job to say, should the president know that or should the president not? So after I read it, I thought, or watched it, I thought, I wonder if that's what Judas thought. Like, I'm going to be Jesus's chief of staff because that's how important I'm going to be. So we kind of see that he was in this for what he could get out of it for himself. But then suddenly the tide starts changing. And look at Luke 9:22. He says, Jesus saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised up on the third day. Okay, now think about that. Judas is like, hey, we're going to reign. And all of a sudden he's like, what? You're going to die? Like, that's not what I signed up for here. I expected to reign with you. And suddenly Judas starts going, this isn't really what I signed up for. And so then we start seeing this progression. Look at John 12:3-6. Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was intending to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor people? So he's got this outside thing that says, I am all about helping the poor. But this is what it says in verse 6. Now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief, and as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. So for him, he's like, okay, if I lose my status with Jesus, and if he's going to die, then I'm clearly going to lose my income where I'm stealing all this money from. And I signed up to be rich and famous, and now that I'm not going to be rich and famous anymore. And when Judas realized that it wasn't going to promote him in any way, he says, I'm just done. I'm done with this whole thing. And I think for Judas, it's kind of like us. Judas was fine when following Jesus meant he got money and everyone loved him and he was in the inner circle. And I think that translates for us, that we're fine with following Jesus when the bills are paid and there's money in the account and there's no sickness and the kids are fine and our husbands love us and everything's great. Like, it's easy to follow Jesus then. But it's not so easy when Jesus starts talking about dying and betrayal or burial, and the shift changes. And see, in us it translates that when things don't go our way and we start getting no answers from God and our lives seem to be falling apart, it's just not so easy to follow Jesus when things like that are going on in our life. And so that's what, we may not want to be in his group anymore when that happens. So Judas does this really drastic. Matthew 26:14. Then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me to betray him to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then on, they began looking for a good opportunity to betray him. And to me, that is the most shocking statement in the Bible. I'm like, how in the world do you know God and know his power and see everything that he's done and then say, I'm going to come up against, are you freezing? Okay, I forgot to tell him to turn it. Can someone maybe run out there and just tell him to turn it off? Thank you. Yeah, it does that. It's weird like that here. It gets so hot in the morning and then, so I always thank you for doing that. That's the only way I know. People are freezing to death up there. I can feel it up here. So I don't know why, but okay. Anyway, my problem with Judas is that I just can't explain, I can't imagine that somebody who's, and for us reading the Bible, this powerful God, I don't think I want to come up against it. He like wipes out nations and raises the dead. Like, who does that? But Judas really did that. He just apparently did not believe that he was the Son of God. Now, I think from that we see that there's a lot of people that are in the churches or whatever, and they're following Jesus for all the wrong reasons. I remember going to a study one time, and I invited someone, and they said, is it a networking Bible study? And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? We're just learning God's Word. And they're like, well, there's studies out there where people come so that they can, get their, sell their whatever and talk to people into like buying real estate or whatever, They're networking. And I'm like, okay, that goes on, but I guess it does. So, but I'm thinking that's what Judas was in it for. Like, what is in it for me? And I don't want us to be that way. Now, secondly, and this is really, really important to know, and I hate to say it, and I woke up this morning at 1 o'clock thinking, I feel like this lesson is kind of like I'm Debbie Downer today, and I'm not trying to be, but we got to see this in order to get a handle on disappointment. It is really possible, and I hate to say this, but the Bible does, and I think we see it from Judas, that it is possible to be near Christ, to associate with his followers, to be engaged in ministry, and not be saved. And I hate saying that, but I think Judas gives us a brilliant example that he was all of those. He hung out with Jesus for 3 years. He probably was baptized, right? He had to do that in order to follow him. There's nothing that says Judas didn't have the same ability to heal people and cast out demons. Whatever the disciples, the power that God had given them, sure, probably Judas had it too. But I think that it's shocking when we see that somebody that close never really got it, never really understood. So I think we need to understand that. Now, most of you will probably remember the Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye and Jenkins. And it's all about the rapture. Some people believe that, there'll be a rapture and the church goes away and everyone else is left behind. But, or you come down on that, whatever. But in this particular book, the most brilliant thing they did was make the assistant pastor be left behind. And I was like, that's brilliant, because it's so true. There's people in the church that are doing all of this for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. And so for us, I want to make sure that it's not our place to judge, so we don't need to go around doing that. But I think we need to recognize in our own life, and we need to say, why am I following it? Am I doing this for the right reason? Am I doing it to network or to get close to whoever or whatever? Or am I doing it because I really, really love Jesus and I want to know? There's a big difference there, and I see that in the life of Judas. Now, the interesting thing is that Jesus knew this before. Look at John 6:70. Because Jesus answered, did I myself not choose you to 12, and yet one of you is the devil? He says that a year before he even goes to the cross. And you just imagine Peter and James, and they're looking around going, what is he talking about? One of us is the devil. Like, we're all friends here. We're all in the same boat. But they really weren't. Charles Templeton, I know we've talked about him before, he preached with Billy Graham. And he walked away. Like, he preached in front of crowds and crowds of people about Jesus and got disillusioned and walked away and died, never ever coming back. And so it's just shocking how close a person can be to the kingdom of God, but still really be lost. And so it's kind of a way for us to look back and say, is that going on in my life? In your handout, there, John Rice wrote something in Judas Iscariot's Sword of the Lord. This is what he says. Judas was counted as a follower of Christ, but was lost. He was baptized, and yet he was lost. He preached the gospel, and yet was lost. He was trusted by all who knew him, save Jesus, and yet he was lost. It is a terrible thing to go to hell from anywhere, but what sorrow, remorse must be the portion of those who go to hell from the church. And I thought, that's brilliant. It's so true. It's so sad and shocking. But Judas is just a reminder to us that church attendance and church membership and involvement in ministry is never an assurance of salvation. But what is assurance of our salvation is, are we growing? Like, are we growing in our faith? Are we different last year than we are this year? Do we care more and more for the things of God as our life progresses and less about just things that make me comfortable? Mark Driscoll wrote this, and I put it in your handout for you right there. He says, while writing Religion Saves, my family and I hosted a dinner and a house party for mainly young guys who work in one of our departments at our church. At one point in the evening, I found myself sitting in the living room having a discussion about theological issues with maybe a dozen young men in their 20s. A few years prior, nearly all of them were single, but living with and sleeping with women, looking at porn, drinking too much, and acting immaturely. The difference between their past and their present life is solely due to the fact that God has changed them through Jesus' cross and the Spirit's indwelling, and they will never be the same. The changes in their life are evident that they are now connected to the living God of the Bible. And had I seen no change, I would have been hard-pressed to believe that they had become Christians. Why? Because you cannot meet Jesus without changing. And that's been what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, is that that's just the natural progression of what happens when we become a Christian. My husband always says, truth and time go hand in hand. So when you new boyfriend or girlfriend that comes in the household, it's like truth and time. We're going to find out in time if this person is really the person they say they're going to be, and if they're nice to you, or is, and I think the same thing with Christians. People who say, I'm a follower of Christ, give them some time and let's see what happens and if there's growth. Now, the reason why I put those Hebrews 12:2 in your handout, because Jesus says he is the author and the finisher of our faith. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher. So it's like Jesus is the one who drew us to himself. The Holy Spirit opened our eyes to see him. And he says, if I'm the author of it, then I am clearly going to finish this for you. So we kind of know that perseverance is a big thing. Now, there's a lot of different theories on why Judas did what he did. He's just a thief. He's a con artist. He's out for himself. He had this moment of confusion. But it seems like he never really believed that Jesus was God or that he was the Messiah, because in everything, he never ever used the title Lord. He always used the title Rabbi, which meant teacher. So for some reason, it gives a little insight into he thinks that Jesus was just a good teacher, even though he saw all the stuff he did is unimaginable. But I think that when Judas started putting everything together and he started realizing that Jesus wasn't going to take over Rome and he wasn't going to have a position, I think he got disillusioned and disappointed, and that's what I'm going to finish out today and talk about. Because I think so many people get disappointed with God when things don't happen the way they want to, and then they have certain expectations. It's like, I expect you, God, to answer my prayers the way I want. I expect my life to be better. I expect you never let me go through struggles. And I think when I say that, it's kind of like we say, I expect you to just always make me happy. Okay? And I think what we're learning is being a disciple, it's not about our happiness, it's about following Jesus wherever he takes us. And a lot of times those places aren't really happy places. So I want to just tell you that the Bible never promises that God just says, I'm going to make you happy all the time. And we're hard for us to tell people that. When we, hey, come to Jesus, you get to go to heaven. Well, that's great. But we don't say, you know what, following him is going to cost you something. I talked to a girl the other day, having lunch, and she said, I invited a friend to church, and I was so excited. And afterwards, she was mocking me, mocking the church. And she said, it just so hurt my feelings. And I was like, welcome to being a follower of Jesus. Because that's just what happens. Like, people aren't going to like us. They're just not. So what we do is we see the opposite, and that's why we have to read our Bibles to find out all the people in the Bible, what happened to them. You see Daniel get thrown in a lion's den. You get Jeremiah, he's thrown in a sewer pit, basically. And you're thinking, these are the men that God just loved, and yeah, and I told Rob, I woke up this morning and said, it's such a downer lesson. Like, I don't know how to make this happy for everybody. Except to the end, hopefully we'll get that. So I want to talk about when God is silent and he isn't showing up in your life. And I want us to talk about, because I think that might have been Judas's problem, but Philip Yancey wrote a book called Disappointment with God. And some of you, if you were here a couple years ago, I know we talked about this story. And It's one of the best books I've ever read if you want to know about being disappointed with God and what to do. Philip Yancey. And so we talked about Richard. And I'm going to talk about Richard again because he gives me such a good example of what to do. Richard is a man that Philip talks about in his book. And he went to Wheaton College. Billy Graham went to Wheaton, the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College. So we're talking like Christian college of all Christian colleges. And which made me think about Billy Graham. I was reading this thing the other day, and it was so cute. I thought, there's a story of Billy Graham, and he was visiting one of the cities for his crusades, and he had written a letter, and he was looking for the post office. He was wandering around the city looking for it. He comes upon a little boy, and he says, do you know the way to the post office? And he was like, well, yeah, so he gave him directions. And so right as he was leaving, Billy said, hey, if you come over to the arena tonight, I'll tell you how to get to heaven. And he said, how would you know how to get to heaven? Like, you can't even find a post office. So I know that was cute. Anyway, so Richard, this is the school, the caliber of school that Richard went to. And he wrote a paper on the life of Job. And it was just an incredible paper. Somehow he sent the paper to Philip Yancey. I think Philip must live in Chicago. He sent this paper to him and says, would you read this paper over? And so he did. And he was so blown away by the brilliance of this kid that wrote this paper on Job. He says, let's get it published, okay? So they go, they get it all, right before the book comes out. Richard calls Philip and says, I need to meet with you. They've never met up to this point. Comes over to his house, and he said, what can I do? And he said, I just want to tell you that I hate God. I hate him. In fact, I don't know if I hate him. I don't even believe in him anymore. And Philip's going, what? You just wrote a book on Job. Like, what is that all about? And he said, everything that I ask God for, he does nothing. I ask him, I pray about something, and then I assume that this is going to be God's will, and I go do it, and then it falls apart. And there was just disappointment. My girlfriend left me, my fiance left me. I mean, this just went on and on. And Philip was just listening to him, and he said, so what I did was I went into my apartment, and I lay down on the floor for 4 hours, and I said, God, you got 4 hours to speak to me. And he said, after 4 hours, I heard nothing. I got up, I took my Bible and all my Christian books, walked downstairs, flipped on my barbecue, threw them in, and he said, up with the smoke went his faith. And to my knowledge, he's never ever come back. But the problem is, I think a lot of people are like Richard, because somehow they feel like God should show up in their life. And I see this on Facebook a lot, like with our women's ministry thing on Facebook. People will message me all the time, and they're so sad and depressed and miserable, and God just doesn't seem to be showing up when they need a job or when they need something. And so to them, it's like, why am I putting my faith in a silent God that really doesn't even seem to care about me? And so I think that's out there, and we need to deal with, because we don't want to be like Richard. We don't want to end our Christian faith that way. But what I think is going on here is that I think what God says is, I've already shown myself to you. And so what I want you to do now is I want you to walk by faith and not by sight. Because I've already showed up. How do you not see it? Go outside at nighttime and look up. There's the stars. There's the moon. There's all this beautiful creation. There's the ocean. Here, look at the waves. It's like, there's a verse that says, the proud waves will never go past this barrier. Okay, that's a lot of ocean there. It never really goes past because God's in control of the whole however it works. But he's saying, I've given you all this to see who I am. And then he says, read your Bible. Let's look and see what happened. You see Moses and you see Pharaoh, and Moses says, let my people go. And God unleashes the most amazing miracles you've ever seen. You've got, frogs, and the river turns to blood, and all these crazy things, and the Israelites go, wow, this is cool. And then they get out, because they've seen the power of God. Now they go in front of the sea, and the Egyptians are coming after them, and they're like, we're going to die. And God parts the sea. Okay, miracle after miracle after miracle they see. And what did that do for them? Nothing. Do you know that the majority of them never made it to the promised land? They threw all their jewelry in and made a molten cow so that they could bow down and worship to him. And God's going, serious? And that's how I feel about Judas. Serious? You just saw my entire power, everything I could do. I showed you that I was God. I've given you miracle after miracle. And none of it grew their faith. So something else has to be going on. And I think what's going on is God is saying, I want you to have faith in me and trust me if you never see a miracle. That's what I want from you. I was laughing, I'm like, here God is giving them like a cloud by day and then a pillar of fire by night so that, so that showing he's there. And then they're hungry. I'm hungry. Okay, so he gives them manna from the heavens. So here's this beautiful, awesome food, manna. Okay, I'm bored with manna. Okay, I'll give you birds. Like, what's with birds? So have some birds. It's like, I want a new pair of Nikes. Okay, and it's like, I gave you Nikes 39 years ago. They have never worn out. Isn't that a miracle in itself? Like, you walked around the desert, and they're like, yeah, this is not good enough. See, we could see, and Richard could have seen God come through. He could have shown up to him and did a dance, for crying out loud. And I don't think it would have changed Richard's mind. I really don't. I think what God is looking for is faith that says, I am going to trust you, God, no matter what you do in my life. And so I was taking Richard, and then we went from Richard over to Job. I started thinking about Job. And I thought, here's a man who never saw what the Israelites saw. He never saw anything. He just loved God, and he had kids, and he prayed for them. And one day his whole world fell apart. 10 kids died, all his servants died, his animals died, everything. And God was silent, silent. And you're thinking, but he was so faithful and he loved God. Yeah, and God was silent. Because unbeknownst to Job, God was in heaven making a bet with Satan, Job's my guy. He'll always follow me, regardless of if he never ever sees me do anything in his life. And I think that what Job tells us is that's the normal Christian life. That we're going to have bad things that come in and out of our life all the time. And it's going to be our choice to say, I give up, God. I give up on you, God, because you just don't seem to be coming through. Instead of saying, I don't really understand this, but I'm going to walk by faith to know you're doing something, and I don't understand what. But that's the kind of faith that God wants from us. Philip Yancey says, I think I put this in your handout. I'm hoping I did. Philip Yancey says this. He says fidelity, and then I got words that so we would understand fidelity means devotion or commitment. So he's saying devotion or commitment involves learning to trust that out beyond the perimeter of fog, God still reigns and does not abandon us no matter how it appears. He doesn't say that this guy get lost in the fog and can't figure out where he's going. But for us it says, my life is in a fog right now. I just can't see beyond the trouble and the pain and everything that's going through. And yet beyond that fog, I trust that God is out there and he's doing something and he knows what's happening. And I think that the difference that I found between Judas, who saw lots of miracles, and Job, who never saw that. We see Judas ran, and Job didn't. He stayed. He stayed, and he said, God, my life is just yours, whatever that looks like. And he struggled through the loss, and in the end, he was the one that was able to see really who God was. Rabbi Abraham Heschel, I think I put this in your handout too, said this: faith like Job's cannot be shaken because it is a result of having been shaken. And I think that's brilliant. It's like the reason why Job could stand up to anything that happened was because God had shaken him, and he came through okay on the whole other hand. And that is what I think that God is looking for. Now, one thing Philip Yancey says in this book is this: God does not feel any obligation to show himself to us because he already did. And we know how well that turned out. It's like he showed up time after time in the Old Testament, time after time in the New Testament, miracle after miracle, and people still didn't look. Here's Jesus, okay? How many people saw his miracles? Thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And they didn't follow him to the end. They just walked away from him. So I thought about when Jesus rose from the dead. You have all these people. On the day of Pentecost, which was 10 days after Jesus went back to heaven, there was 120 people there. That's it. After the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that saw everything he did, 120 people were in that room. And you're just like, what? How is that even possible? But I think it's because we have this relationship with God that says, I'm going to love you if you do what I expect I expect you to do. I'm going to love you if you do what I ask you to do. You guys, well, that is not what I want. I want a relationship with you that says, no matter what happens, you're going to follow me anyway. I was thinking about this the other day. I thought, you know what? I want Rob to love me no matter what. If I got in a car accident and I lost my arms and my legs, I would want him to be by my side. Okay, and I started thinking about that, and I thought, if I lost my arms and legs, like he would, there is my side. There's nothing else. So he would have to be by my side. And then I started picturing myself, no arms and legs, and then Rob by my side, and then it got weird from there. So we decided I just didn't follow that anymore. But I think the thing is, he wants us to love him regardless of whatever happens in our life. And the interesting thing is that when God does show up to Job later on, like 38 chapters into Job, he never ever explains to Job like why he did what he did. He never said, hey Job, you're so awesome, buddy, thank you so much. I won the bet with Satan, like this is really a good deal. He never said that. He never ever said, Job, you're just the most awesome guy, and now I want to explain to you why I took your wife or your children and your never. There was not one thing that God had to explain to Job. And that's what we got to get. God is God. He can do anything he wants. And when we sign up to follow him, we sign up to say, all right, God, my life is yours. Whatever you want to do with my life, I'm going to be good with. Because I'm not going to be in a relationship that says you have to do this or that in order to make me love you. It just doesn't work that way. But somehow, like we've been talking about this word Christian, this Americanized Christianity is telling us something completely different. It's saying that God is there to make us happy. And it's just, it doesn't work that way. We were watching a show the other night. One of the characters asked the other one, do you believe in God? And he said, you know what? I believe that God is up in heaven with a big long beard and white hair and sitting on a chair someplace. That's their view. And what we want to do here is get the right, proper view of God so that when tragedy strikes in our household or when something happens that's devastating, we're okay. We just don't fall apart. I want a good view. We're getting ready to have our 8th grandkid and grandchild. Grandchild, okay? And I always tell you I'm the worst grandmother, which I am. But my little Val and Robbie, our oldest son, they had their 10-year anniversary this year. So they were going away for about, I don't know, a week. And Robbie came and said, Mom, do you think you could watch the kids for a couple days? I'm like, oh, sure, because I'm such a good grandmother, whatever. So the kids are 2, 4, and 7. Okay, imagine me with a 2, 4, and 7-year-old. Okay. And I realized why they made mothers young. I now understand why God says, when you're young, we're giving you kids. When you're older, okay, so Rob and I have this routine because we have teenagers, so they never get up in the morning, so we have our mornings free. So we wake up, we're at the cabin, we wake up and we have hot chocolate and coffee, and we're just sitting down getting ready to read, and all of a sudden we hear this little feet going, hi Mama Lee, hi Papa Rob, and I'm like, serious? You guys are awake this early? This is just going to ruin my life. We don't know. They're so cute. But anyway, they're kids, and I love them. We had fun, so don't ever, they like not to ever ask me to babysit, but I won't give you a list of babysitters if you would like. I found this place called care.com. Okay, just type in babysitter, and I gave him a list of names one time. But anyway, so William, we have to figure out William. He's the cutest thing in the whole world. He's 2, he just turned 3. Okay, William is very strong-willed. When he went from us, we kept him Monday and then dropped him off Thursday morning to the other grandma. And when I got to the other grandma, I said, here's how you deal with William. You give him anything he wants. Okay, you never tell him no. And that's just how, and we'll let Robbie and Val deal with that when they get home. They can deal with him when he's back. But for us, because we're old and we just, the whole thing, give him what he wants. So anyway, while we had it, we decided to go bowling. Okay, if you've ever tried bowling with a 2, 4, and 7-year-old, it's hysterical. Anyway, took William into the bathroom, and for somebody, he was doing something, I don't know what it was, and I told him no. I said, William, no. And he looked at me with his hands on his, and he goes, no. Okay. And I put the meanest grandma face you've ever seen in your life, and I said, did you, get this straight, okay, did you just tell me no? And he goes, I mean, yes. It was like the cutest thing I've ever heard. But it's kind of like, I wonder if that's how God feels feels when we tell him no. He's like, are you serious? Are you telling me no? So I kind of got a view of my relationship with God through adorable little loyalty. Okay, anyway, but I think that's why people walk away, because they get disillusioned in the things. Now, I felt this way on Sunday. Most of you, we talked about little Katie Wagner last week. She's a high school student. She's about 17 or 18 years old. And she has cancer, went into remission. And she's one of these kids that just loves God beyond anything. Like her whole life is all about him. And so Sunday, I felt very sad. I felt very sad and overwhelmed because I have high school kids. And if they got cancer, and I knew she was dying. Like I had heard that she was very, very close to death, and she didn't have much longer to live. And so I prayed just all day long. I kept praying, God, would you heal her? Like, you can heal her. You are that big. Like, in one little nanosecond, just poof, cancer's gone. Why won't you do that? Like, here's a family who loves you, and here's Katie who loves you. She Facebooked, or on Facebook message, Cheyenne told me that night, because it's like the Cheyenne, she came home crying that night too. She said, Mom, I cried today. I just don't understand what's going on here. She said, Katie Facebooked this message. She said, I'm too weak to write, but my mom is writing this for me, and I just want you to know that I'm perfectly fine with how God is writing my story. 17-year-old. Wow. She passed away last night. Okay. It was so heartbreaking, but I have a better perspective now, because I'm like, you know what? I know God can heal her. There have been prayers and prayers for God to heal her. And he did. And then we say, okay, I said to Chris this morning, I said, God, she's in heaven right now. Like, how cool is that? Like, sad for her parents, but we have hope. There's just something about being a follower of Jesus that says, it's not about here. It's about hope for eternity. This is a bad, goofy life down here. Bad things are going to happen, but we have to learn how to have a relationship with God apart from our circumstances. Like we know he's involved, but we love him first, and then the circumstances seem to follow that. Philip Yancey also interviewed a man named Douglas. Are you serious? Oh, it's 9:55. How did that happen? Okay, we're not going to talk about Douglas. We don't have time. Darn it, I really wanted to get to this, because I wanted to make it a happy ending for everybody today. I want to just say this, and hopefully I wrote this, because you need to put this on your refrigerator. Our biggest trial in life becomes our biggest blessing if we allow it to push us closer to God. Our biggest trial in our life, whatever it is that you're going through, can be the biggest blessing if it makes us grow closer to God. And I'll tell you what, I bet Katie's parents have been pushed so close to God because of this horrific trial in their life. But they didn't do what Judas did, and they didn't walk away. They will use this till the end because of it. Now, I never do this because I hate to read. I hate it when people read to me. But I'm going to tell you, I read this about, what's her name? Corrie ten Boom. And most of you know she was in the time of the Holocaust, and they were followers of Christ. And the soldiers came in and took her and her family out of their home. And I just want to read this to you because I want you to see the difference between what Judas did and what someone like Corrie ten Boom or Katie's parents or the people who follow Jesus, not because of what he gives them, but because they just love him and they want to serve him. And she says, it says, the soldiers stormed in, knocking her dad to the ground, bloodying her sister's face, pulling Corrie out of bed when she was sick with the flu. And she said they ended up in a concentration camp. Later she went to Ravenbrook, and the latter was a death camp. So someone had written and said, this is what went on there. Our entire possessions consisted of a tin plate, a tin pot, a wooden spoon, nothing else, not a hairpin, washcloth, sewing kit, or anything. In a very short time, I was covered from head to toe with large festering wounds caused by filth, dog bites, and vitamin deficiency. In the sleeping quarters, we lay without sheets or blankets. There was scarcely any window panes, constant draft. The worst thing was the cold, for every morning, often long before daybreak, we stood without coats or any protective covering in the cold. And this was their life, okay? And you can't imagine this for someone who's a follower of Jesus, because we think, being a follower of Jesus, he should never put us in that position. He should never put Katie's parents in that position. He should never put the Saeed's wife in the position where he's in an Arabian prison. Really, Jesus, that's who we're following? Yes, that's who we're following. This is what she says. Faced with unbearable suffering, Corey and Betsy Ten Boom didn't lash out at their captors. Instead, they prayed. They never questioned the goodness or mercy of God. Instead, they started a Bible study inside a flea-infested dorm, a room so filthy not even the guards would enter. Neither ever screamed at heaven demanding answers because they were too busy giving hope. And that's the difference. It's like Katie's parents are going to be so busy giving hope, they're going to be devastated. It's going to be the toughest next couple of years of their life. But I know, because you know, their faith in Christ isn't a contract. It's not a, God, I'm going to love you if you just do what I want. Instead, it's a relationship. It's a, God, my life is yours. Whatever you want is fine with me, because I am here. We have eternity to look forward to. I just want to serve you while I'm here. And we see that from Corey Ten Boom. So I think as we leave today, I just want to ask the question and make sure that we will always have that choice. We'll always have that choice to make that decision. Am I going to be Judas and Richard, or am I going to be Joe and Corey Ten Boom and Katie's parents? Like, we have that choice in our life. And because we're here, I want to study the Bible so well that we know God, that nothing will ever rock our world. And if you're here and you don't know Jesus, I'm telling you what, we're talking eternity in one place or the other. And we want everyone here, if you're watching online or on Roku, we want you to find Christ. And it's so simple. It's like, Jesus, I just want to know you. I don't even know what that looks like. Open the Bible, ask him to come in your life, and he will do that, and he will start changing you, and it will be incredible.